In foreign policy, Reagan really revived and reinvigorated the Cold War. He called the Soviet Union the evil empire and claimed it was the source for terrorism, which wouldn't exactly turn out to be true. He said he would not negotiate with the Soviet Union or any of America's enemies until they stopped the abuses of their people. He proposed and really kind of fell in love with an idea that was called Star Wars at the time, or the Strategic Defense Initiative. It was the most expensive military program in American history, and it didn't work. And in fact, there were no scientists who believed that it would work, but Reagan continued to push it. The idea is that we would have lasers in space that would be able to shoot down any missiles the Soviets fired at us up safely beyond the atmosphere in space, so they couldn't hurt us. The Soviets claimed that it was a plot that if we got this thing up there and got it operational, then we could nuke them and they would have no way to fight back. And so there was a lot of concern in the Soviet Union and the rest of the world, really, that this would allow America to wipe out the Soviets. The fear of nuclear weapons is really going to see a resurgence here. And in fact, 1 million Americans will rally in Central Park demanding that we de-escalate our nuclear stockpile. In 1983, though, Reagan reverses his position and begins a series of negotiations with the Soviet Union. Reagan puts into place the Reagan Doctrine. He says that America will provide aid to groups resisting communism anywhere in the world. In October of 1983, when Marxists seize control of the country of Grenada, Reagan is going to send in American forces. It's only going to take a day or so, a few days maybe, to remove these forces. Grenada is a tiny island, but we do get actively involved there. We back death squads in El Salvador who are fighting against the leftists in El Salvador, but they're also doing things like roaming the countryside and murdering anybody who disagrees with them. There's one particularly grisly incident where they stop a bus full of nuns and take them off the bus and murder them. And these are people who are funded and trained and supplied by Americans. Most significantly, though, is the Civil War in Nicaragua. Reagan becomes convinced that Nicaragua is going to be the Soviet Union's Vietnam. He believes that he can draw the Soviet Union into Nicaragua, and by backing the right-wing Contras against the left-wing Sandinistas in Nicaragua, Reagan can bring down the Soviet Union. Congress tells him, no, we don't want to get involved in Nicaragua, and Reagan keeps pushing this, and so they pass something called the Boland Amendment, which specifically forbids any military aid to the Contras in Nicaragua, and that's about to be very important. In June of 1982, when Israel invades Lebanon to try to push out the Palestinian Liberation Organization, which is headquartered in Lebanon, the Marines move in to try to pacify the situation. And we leave a large force of Marines in a base in Beirut, Lebanon. And in 1983, it says 82 there, but it's really 83, a suicide bomber pulls up a truck to the gates of the Marine base and blows up a massive bomb at our Marine base there, killing 241 American Marines. Reagan responds by leaving. He pulls our Marines out of Lebanon, and critics, of course, accuse him of running away from this terrorist attack. Lebanon really marks a turning point, maybe the hostage crisis, but Lebanon, because it was so violent, we could call a turning point as we begin to move into a period of terrorism. And what's going on here is small, relatively powerless groups finding no other possible way to fight back against huge forces like the United States and the Soviet Union, are turning to things like suicide bombers. And over the coming decades, we're going to see airplanes, cruise ships, American embassies all over the world, over and over again, become the targets of these terrorists. And of course, hostage-taking will become more and more common. One of our CIA station chiefs, that guy up there in the top left, will be seized, tortured, and killed in one of these schemes. In 1986, Reagan declares that Muammar Gaddafi, the leader of Libya at the time, is backing some of these terrorist organizations, and he bombs Libya briefly But he does little else to combat terrorism beyond that. And in fact, his administration is going to be permanently scarred by his attempts to deal with terrorists here in a minute. In 1984, the Republican Party is firmly united behind Reagan, who's very popular among Republicans. He's again, he struggles to stay much above 50% approval rating because Democrats tend to hate him. But he's very popular with his own party. The Democrats have a complicated kind of a roller coaster ride of a primary. It looks like young Colorado Senator Gary Hart is on his way to seizing the nomination, and he has quite a bit of support behind him until pictures come out of him canoodling with his secretary. He's down there on the bottom left on the pier. Jesse Jackson makes a spirited run. He never really has a chance to get the nominee, but he's the first black guy who really looks like he might be a serious candidate to get the nomination for his party to be president. But in the end, it's Walter Mondale. Mondale, who had been Carter's vice president, fails to inspire a whole lot of enthusiasm. He tries to get some energy in his campaign by putting the first woman on the ticket. Geraldine Ferraro will be his vice presidential candidate. But it's not really going to matter much in the end because the economy during the campaign itself, which had been so stagnant now for more than a decade, is going to spring to life all of a sudden. It's really going to be the only period of Reagan's presidency where there is really significant economic growth, and it really is extraordinary, and it comes at exactly the right time. Reagan refers to this as morning in America, and a very effective ad that I would put in here, but YouTube rejects everything when I put these videos in. And Reagan just crushes Mondale. As you can see, the only state Mondale wins is his home state of Minnesota. The Democrats do make gains in the Senate, and they keep control of the House. And the conservatives believe this is the next chapter in the great Cold War struggle between the United States and the Soviet Union, that Reagan's re-election marks a reinvigoration of that great global struggle. But in reality, it's the last election of the Cold War.